and the Chi-Yu. Glamora, especially with that power herb, so you can go for that Meteor Beam, get that +1 to the special attack right away. You have to be so careful. And starting things out over in our first match, Kyle Zen, you got that speed and you got some of that power with the Chi-Yu. Over on the opposing end of the field, that Farigiraf and the Ogerpon. So an opportunity to try and maybe have the speed in your favor for Enrique's end.
Not only the speed, but Tornadus also runs Sunny Day. So if you're confident that your Chi-Yu is going to be attacking first already, you have the option to set up that Sunny Day and further boost the power of those fire-type moves, while also weakening the damage from Ogerpon's Ivy Cudgel, which could come in really handy here for Kyle, especially if Trick Room goes up. You don't necessarily want Tailwind to be going, but if you have the Sun up, your Chi-Yu is much less scared of that Ogerpon.
And looking at this point too, considering the Chi-Yu does have the spread damage attacks here, the Ogerpon, this is where you can try going on the offensive potentially there. Normally in past, you would want to see something next to the Ogerpon to follow away something, but at this point, maybe go on the offensive in that end. But Chi-Yu, not wanting to stare down this Wellspring Ogerpon, do not blame it, is going to be swapping out. That is going to be Kyle's own Ogerpon swapping in, making sure that a hit into it from a water-type Ivy Cudgel is going to be completely negated with that Water Absorb. Terastallization coming out as well from Enrique's end. This could have been a power boost. It is going to be the special defense boost, but I think at this point, this Terastallization is not going to matter too much except for being spent early. If it is the Bleak Wind Storm, it will at least get rid of that grass-type weakness.
Farigiraf opts to protect itself, doesn't want to take a huge attack from that Chi-Yu, as Tornadus goes straight for Bleak Wind Storm, just trying to get some damage, a possible speed drop out. It will connect into that Ogerpon, again, because it Terastallized, taking much less damage, thanks to the special defense boost, but Ivy Cudgel coming through into the Water Absorb of Kyle's own Ogerpon, a great swap.
Yeah, the Ogerpon coming in for free on Kyle's end, and the Chi-Yu safely retreated in the back. And it's a turn that you don't necessarily lose too much, and you've gotten Enrique's Terastallization out of him. Of course, there is the possibility now for Enrique to try and go for the Trick Room even at this point, and the Tornadus on the other end, not having clicked the Tailwind. You're in such a nice spot to just keep firing off like those Bleak Wind Storms and just be dealing with some damage on the offensive.
I don't think either player loses a whole lot there. The Ivy Cudgel into the already full health Water Absorb doesn't do too much, but the Bleak Wind Storm coming out again, no Tailwind, as Ivy Cudgel coming out from Enrique's Ogerpon.
The critical hit onto the Farigiraf actually doing a good chunk of damage. Ivy Cudgel into the Tornadus, not enough for the KO. But now the Ivy Cudgel on the other end, not going to be quite enough to be picking up that KO. A little dicey after that Bleak Wind critical hit. But this is the opportunity now for the Farigiraf to get that Trick Room and now have Enrique have some of the slower Pokemon. Though we did get to see that his Ogerpon, at least on that turn, was the faster one.
Yeah, that's good. It's good information. The Ogerpon speed is always something you have to figure out. Trainers opt to train their Ogerpons so many different ways, so figuring out which one is faster can make the difference later on in a match, or even later on in like the next game in a best of 3. I like that Trick Room there too, though. The Amoonguss in the back we're going to see coming out from Enrique is really like the most functional in Trick Room. You do have to worry about that Ogerpon though still on Kyle's end, because it has not Terastallized. It is still that grass type, will be immune to Spores and Rage Powders, can't be redirected, and can also just redirect Spores right into it. So a little bit tough spot for this Amoonguss coming in.
Yeah, the Amoonguss, not necessarily the damage dealer you'd be looking at, but the Farigiraf that we have is one of the ones that can be doing some good amount of damage, but of course wanting to be set up for success and protecting it past this turn. Sunny Day from the Tornadus, maybe making sure that an Ivy Cudgel coming out from Enrique's and it's not going to do too much, especially since Kyle opting for the Horn Leech of this situation.
I like the Sunny Day there a lot. The Prankster means that it still goes off regardless of the Trick Room going up. And if the Farigiraf opted to go for something like a Hyper Voice that turn, it meant that the Tornadus would definitely be able to, get the Sun up if the Hyper Voice KO'd it, and then you could possibly bring in that Chi-Yu and have the redirection going with that Ogerpon to fire off some very strong fire-type attacks.
At this point, though, the Farigiraf was down to so little damage, but the Amoonguss coming in safely. You can start going for those pollen puffs, and the Farigiraf can definitely be doing some damage. This is the throat spray version here, and we'll be able to fire off some powerful Hyper Voices going on forward. And the Sunny Day is going to be lowering the damage of Kyle's own Ogerpon if you're trying to get a good hit onto the opposing end. Hyper Voice, you had so little you had to do to that Tornadus. That is completely fine, but now this is where you'll get that special attack boost for that next turn around.
Luckily for Kyle, he still has the option to Terastallize his Chi-Yu if that's what he opts to bring in here. Horn Leech just barely misses that KO on Farigiraf thanks to the Pollen Puff coming out from that Amoonguss. And now Kyle will have the option to switch something in here for that Fallen Tornadus. It is going to be that Chi-Yu, which I think makes a lot of sense. The sun is up. You're going to want to make use of that to fire off your very strong fire-type attacks with that Choice Specs. And even though the Amoonguss does have the option to go for the Follow Me, Chi-Yu has the option to go for a Heat Wave, which will bypass redirection, hit both targets, and Ogerpon can always protect it from a Spore with a possible Follow Me. The +1's special attack Free Graph, a bit of a threat now, but if Chi-Yu does opt to Terrestrialize into a Ghost type, we'll obviously take 0 damage from those Hyper Voices and just neutral damage from Dazzling Gleams.
That's the problematic part, because you do have a special attack boost now onto the Farigiraf, and trying to fire off an attack here into the Chi-Yu, it does have ways to be trying to get around that. And an Amoonguss side Pollen Puff isn't even safe here with that Follow Me redirection. So you definitely have to be really, really careful, because you also don't want to play too passively and get punished then for that turn. Protect on the Farigiraf, have an opportunity to see what is going to be happening, and sure enough, it is that Follow Me. So anything will be redirected, including whatever is from this Amoonguss. That will be the Pollen Puff into it. A really good chunk of damage into it, considering the super effectiveness and that Beads of Ruin. But Heat Wave coming off. This is a Heat Wave in the sun. But it looks like it's going to be a miss on the Amoonguss.
That is really unfortunate for Kyle. That would have been a pretty easy KO there. The Sun and the Choice Specs combining for a lot of damage into that Amoonguss. And of course, the Amoonguss cannot Terrestrialize because Enrique's own Ogerpon already has. That's really a Heat Wave you wanted to connect, because if the Amoonguss goes away, your Chi-Yu gets opened up so much. You don't have to worry about Spores anymore. You not necessarily have to worry about going for something like a Follow Me with Ogerpon either. So kind of a rough break for Kyle. They're missing that Heat Wave, but it's still kind of a net neutral. If the Chi-Yu does Terrestrialize, it'll be forced to be only taking damage from Dazzling Gleam, and you do still have one opportunity to redirect another Spore on this turn. So you do have to kind of spend your Terrestrialization on it, which is unfortunate, but in this case, not an unrecoverable miss from Kyle.
At this point, no Terrestrialization and a Follow Me coming out. And considering the damage done from the Pollen Puff this last time around, this Pollen Puff and the Hyper Voice, even just the Pollen Puff by itself, is going to be a critical hit. The Amoonguss really wanted to show its stuff here. It would have been able to get a KO with that double up, considering the Farigiraf's going to be firing off an attack anyways. But now this is going to be single target damage into the Chi-Yu. But still, Farigiraf is kind of underwhelming. A miss. Amoonguss again. The Amoonguss has not been touched, and now that thing redirecting that the Ogerpon's been taken care of. You still have the Trick Room. You have to re-go for that. Okay, you know Trick Room, but the Amoonguss still free to try and be disrupting the plan, and Kyle's only down to 2 more Pokemon.
Trick Room is gone at least, which is nice, but Kyle, like you said, Sierra, is down to 2 Pokemon, and Fluttermane coming out means that it will actually get the benefit of Photosynthesis thanks to Kyle's Tornadus going for that Sunny Day. We see the special attack boost, and there is no protect on this Choice Specs Chi-Yu, no way to swap it out, and a single Moonblast probably enough to KO it from this range thanks to that Dazzling Gleam chip damage. Really rough turn of events, not being able to connect on either of those Heat Waves into that Amoonguss slot. And now Glimmora is, somewhat strong into Fluttermane. You have the option to get off a really strong Meteor Beam here, but at this point, you have to imagine it's going to be tough for Kyle to come back from this, because I don't think Chi-Yu gets the chance to attack anymore.
That's the problem, too, being the fact that the Trick Room just ended. Sure, the Amoonguss doesn't thrive in that situation, but the Fluttermane definitely can. We're finally going to see that late-game Terrestrialization coming out. That'll be the Glimmora into that Grass type, though we'll have to see how that one can fare out, because we did get to see Clear Smog to try and negate a boost if it manages to get one, and would hit for super effective. Moonblast should have been good anyways, but the critical hit just to add a little bit of insult to injury here at this point, and instead Glimmora with that Sludge Bomb. Not doing nearly enough to that Fluttermane, and that's so much damage from this Amoonguss in return.
The Clear Smog, a great option there. It doesn't negate any boost from a Meteor Beam that could have come out from that slot. Unfortunately for Kyle, he kind of was forced to Terrestrialize there, because if Amoonguss goes for a Spore and puts Glimmora to sleep, I think it's kind of just impossible to win from there. So smart Terrestrialization, but also a smart use of Clear Smog there to make sure that, if it does Terrestrialize, that's some extra damage. If it does go for Meteor Beam, it's not going to be +1 for the rest of the game. And now at this point, Enrique should just be able to clean this game up with Fluttermane and whatever else is left in the back. Also, Terrestrializing, you lost your poison typing. You just get knocked out by Moonblast here, probably.
Yeah, and that was definitely a rough game, and now we already see Kyle, even on that last turn, picking up the team sheet to try and see where things can go differently in Game 2. And I think that's tough, because Enrique played really, really well, but I think so did Kyle. I think it's when you're looking at it, it was pivotal turns with Heat Wave missing not once but twice onto the Amoonguss, something that should have been able to pick that up cleanly, considering it was a sun-boosted Chi-Yu, Beads of Ruin, Choice Specs. that is some damage. And missing out on that with the Amoonguss multiple times, I think it's just a really, really tough blow. So I'm curious how much you want to adjust the gameplay for maybe a consistency option versus, hey, I know I kind of got unlucky, maybe I didn't run it back.
I'm with you. I do think Kyle actually put himself in a really strong spot there. If the Amoonguss gets knocked out by either Heat Wave, you have the option to use your Ogerpon to threaten Enrique's own Ogerpon. That's kind of the one thing that's not going to be taking a whole lot of damage from those Chi-Yu Heat Waves. But I believe, like you said earlier on in that game, Sierra, the Ogerpon on Enrique's side should be faster than Kyle's Ogerpon, which means in Trick Room, Kyle's Ogerpon attacks first, and given that Enrique's had terastallized the Horn Lead to become super effective and probably able to knock it out. So a rough turn of events there, not being able to connect to that Heat Wave. If you're moving into Game 2, if you're Kyle, you have to wonder, do I stick to the same plan and hope that it just goes better if I land those Heat Waves? Or do you think Enrique possibly knows, this is what I was trying to do, and even though it didn't work and Enrique now is up a game, do you try to proactively counter an adjustment from Kyle there?
Well, that's exactly it, because you got to see in the first game, too, too, that Kyle does have the option for the speed. So you do threaten the Trick Room on your own end, but if you think Kyle's going to be adjusting, you can be trying to do something a little bit more heads up. Though I do think when you're looking at Enrique's team, looking into the opposing end, besides the Ogerpons, where Enrique's is actually slower in Trick Room, I think otherwise you do really like this team in that Trick Room situation. I do think that maybe it wasn't off-putting the amount of damage that I maybe would have liked to see, to where it could be tricky if Kyle doesn't have some bad luck in his favor. So that would be kind of one of the biggest things I'd be looking at in this next game.
It's tough running Chi-Yu too, because it is so very strong, but the 3 of the 4 moves that it runs in the form of Heat Wave, Snarl, and Overheat can all miss. So you do have that really small chance of a couple disastrous misses there, which unfortunately did happen to Kyle, but we are moving right past that into game number 2. No Chi-Yu just yet. Ogerpon and Glamora, Kyle's leads of choice in game number 2, facing down the Ogerpon and Farigiraf for Enrique.
A lot more accurate options coming out from Kyle's end, minus that Meteor Beam coming out from the Glamora. And something that can definitely be pressuring some damage over onto the opposing end of the field. Glamora is definitely one of those Pokemon that can hit for so much damage. And Enrique not wanting any of that, not wanting a potential Sludge Bomb into that slot, and it'll be a protect on both of the Pokemon. This is also good to kind of scope out what is going to be done over onto the opposing end, because it's not really a turn where you really lose too much.
You don't lose anything, and if Glamora does go for Meteor Beam here, you actually block all damage coming out from it. It does still go through. You consume the Power Herb to try and attack on that first turn, so there's no longer an option for a one-turn Meteor Beam from Kyle. The good news for Kyle being you do still get that special attack boost. So no Meteor Beam damage, but you're still at +1. You still have the option to redirect any damage away from that Glamora with the Follow Me and start firing off some +1 special attack Sludge Bombs. Unfortunately, I think the +1 Meteor Beam is what you were really going for there. That actually has a chance to cleanly KO Farigiraf in one hit. So that is, I think, what you were really, really wanting if you're Kyle, the chance to try and get that Farigiraf off the field before it can set up Trick Room. But now in this case, you're still heavily threatening the Ogerpon with the Sludge Bomb.
Yeah, you could at least get out a big threat in that Ogerpon, even if it does feel a little bit bad that the ultimate threat to maybe your ideal situation right now can't necessarily be taken down. I do like the terastallization option to at least get out of that weakness to a Sludge Bomb and to have that special defense boost. So we'll see Enrique right away in this game to go for that terastallization.
The special defense boost especially, I think, is what matters the most here. I guess it's both, really, in conjunction with losing the poison-type weakness. But this means any attack you redirect from this Glamora will be much less impactful, certainly not able to one-hit KO without something like a critical hit.
And Follow Me to make sure that Farigiraf is nice and safe going on forward for this turn. And Ogerpon on the opposing end just going for the Follow Me to make sure the Glamora is safe, considering that it definitely wouldn't appreciate an Ivy Cudgel from the opposing end. Sludge Bomb, that's a good amount of damage, but at this point, the Trick Room is set, and Farigiraf will be able to fire off some lackluster hyper voices.
It really won't be great, too, especially considering Farigiraf is running Dazzling Gleam instead of a Psychic-type move. You don't have a great way to damage this Glamora, and considering the speeds of those two Pokemon, I think Glamora should be attacking before Enrique's Ogerpon in Trick Room. We saw Sludge Bomb do over half at +1, which means that one more Sludge Bomb probably knocks it out before it has the chance to Ivy Cudgel, and that's not to mention the option that Kyle has to just attack with Ogerpon right after that, too. So Trick Room does go up, but I feel like it might benefit Kyle more more in this certain scenario.
If we can get a safe swap at this point and a way to be pressuring a little bit more, then I think it could be a good situation. So we will see the swap coming out. Make sure to Sludge Bomb into that Mungus isn't going to be doing the most amount of damage. The crit from the Hyper Voice pickup will be doing a nice little more chunk of damage into the Ogerpon, slowly but surely winning that race, and we'll get the special attack boost from the Throat Spray this time around. Ivy Cudgel into the Farigiraf, just below half at this point, but not the double up, the Sludge Bomb into the Amoonguss. So a lot of damage done over from Kyle's end.
That's a lot of damage. That Sludge Bomb did so much. I'm not used to things like 2-killing Amoonguss with a neutral hit. That is goes to show you just the power of Glamora. The Hyper Voice there does set up the Throat Spray, so now Farigiraf is sitting at +1 special attack, but that's really good damage coming out from both the Ogerpon and Glamora on Kyle's end. And notably the Glamora now acting after Kyle's Ogerpon, so it's hard to say which between Kyle's Glamora and Enrique's Ogerpon will be acting first. We don't really have a way of telling now just because those two seem to be trained in different ways.
Well, at least something is going to be safe from a hit this time around with the Follow Me from Ogerpon on the other end not doing the damage. But what it also notably is going to do is not allow this Farigiraf to be healing up. Though it does mean this Ogerpon goes down. It wouldn't have gone down to another Hyper Voice but alone, but the Pollen Puff double up into it at its own will, considering the Follow Me will do it. But now Sludge Bomb into Amoonguss will get that KO and now force another Pokemon in for Enrique's end.
Two nice KOs there for either player. Another critical hit from that Hyper Voice. That might put Glamora in range for just one more Hyper Voice, which would be unfortunate for Kyle because this Glamora now is, very heavily threatening the rest of Enrique's team. Again, the Trick Room kind of benefiting Kyle a little bit more than Enrique in this case. And we still actually don't know whether or not Glamora will be attacking first before the Ogerpon, but the Hyper Voice might come really close, especially now because Beads of Ruin is active. Glamora will also be taking more damage from this Farigiraf.
Yeah, I think the Beads of Ruin will be what kind of seals the deal for that end if you do want to be keeping that in. It does have the option to go for Protect, but at the same time, then you're leaving the Chew susceptible to getting hit here at that point. So I feel like even though these Hyper Voices isn't the strongest attack in the world, being able to get these crits and just keep doing damage over damage, turn after turn with Farigiraf, is putting you in a position where things do look quite nice.
It is. It's tough here, too. The speeds are going to be really important because if this Chiyu is now the fastest thing on the field, now is when Trick Room comes in really handy for Enrique, but you still have to dispatch this Glamora. I think if Glamora gets an attack on this turn, Sludge Bomb should be able to KO either slot.
Terastallization coming out, though, something that can be good up against that Hyper Voice, of course, will be the Terastallization into the Ghost type. Make sure that you are immune to the normal type attack over onto the opposing end of the field, as well dropping that weakness to a water attack coming out from that Ogerpon. Protect from the Farigiraf, wanting to not take any damage. It will be the double Protect over on this turn. Maybe even thinking, too, that, hey, if you are confident that your own Ogerpon is the faster one, you can get out of the Trick Room. Also get the opportunity to see what the Chiyu locks into.
This is a super speedy Glamora. It's now outsped both the Ogerpon and the Chiyu on Kyle's side of the field. Or rather, I guess, attacked after both of them. But in Trick Room, that means it is the faster of the two. And now the question as to whether the Ogerpon or the Chiyu or Glamora will attack first becomes even more fuzzy, right? If the Ogerpon is faster than Chiyu, that would be really good for Kyle right now because it has a chance to attack. But if it's not, then you have to wonder if the Chiyu can stomach a +1 Dazzling Gleam and an Ivy Cudgel. But actually, no Dazzling Gleam at all.
No Dazzling Gleam. Want to make sure that you can be picking up the KO on Glamora. Just get that damage down. You already knew that it was within range, all things considered. Now the Heat Wave coming up. The Farigiraf getting the KO on the way out, but it will be taken down. Enrique down to now 2 Pokemon. Hornleech, opportunity to be healing some good amount of damage and bringing Chiyu to just down below half. So another Hornleech should theoretically pick it up.
Really smart Hornleech there because of the Terastallization. I don't think an Ivy Cudgel would have KO'd either. And now you do get the chance to heal a bit of your own HP back on this Ogerpon rather. And now this Chiyu is locked into Heat Wave. It will be resisted by this +1 special defense Ogerpon. And you also have to worry about this Flutter Mane coming out. Tornadus should be able to secure a speed advantage with that Tailwind, but I don't think one Heat Wave should be enough for a KO in either slot. So any kind of damage coming out from this Choice Specs Flutter Mane, aided by the Beads of Ruin from this Chiyu into that Tornadus at least, and of course the Water type Ogerpon threatening a big Ivy Cudgel again.
And if you try and do something like set up Sunny Day to allow the Chiyu to do more damage, you wouldn't be outspeeding. So you're kind of forced into setting up this speed and hoping you could be doing enough with the Heat Wave at this point. The double connect, but no KO on either end. And a D-Gleam now. Chiyu just taken down to a bit. Hornleech, though, will be enough to finish it off. And now it's just this Tornadus 1v2. Both of these Pokemon are so low. We have the Bleak Wind Storm.
We do.
But we've also seen how Bleak Wind Storms have gone for Kyle.
It really is a Bleak Wind Storm, huh? You have to connect both of them and hope that it's enough damage to KO this Ogerpon. It may be. It's not a weak move at all. You just have to worry about hitting that 80% accurate move twice and it being enough with the special defense boost. It does connect though, and it is enough. Kyle takes us to game 3.
Redemption for the Tornadus Bleak Wind Storm that let him down before. And we'll have one other opportunity for Kyle to try clean this up. Enrique, it was such a close game, but wow, I'd love to see that adaptations coming out from both players. That was incredible.
That was so good. It really was a redemption indeed, Sierra, because that Tornadus missed a couple of crucial Bleak Wind Storms on stream yesterday in round 8, but in top 8, it put its glasses on. It connected those Bleak Wind Storms that it needed to most. And Kyle, I guess it hit the Bleak Wind Storms and the Heat Waves in this game, hitting all 4 of those with the Chiyu. So really important connections there with those semi-inaccurate moves. And Kyle taking a really, really close game too.
This team is so good when it hits its
exactly.
moves. That's the thing. You're trading off power for that consistency, and we get to see both ends of that coin, because in game 1, being behind because of the Heat Wave misses. You can be mad as you want about the luck of the world, but ultimately running a move that has the pretty decently low accuracy, you can't be too surprised. But of course, we got to see those Heat Waves in that second game do the most. The double Bleak Wind, I mean, if you miss one, you're cooked on the spot.
Yeah.
So honestly, it was really, really well done. And if you can just hit a couple more of those Heat Waves, a couple more of those Bleak Wind Storms, you could be finding yourself in a top 4 situation.
I'm really impressed by this Chiyu's power. That it did so much damage with just a Heat Wave. Like, that's a spread move into a Flutter Mane, which is known to be pretty bulky on the special defense end. And it took it all the way down into the red, just below a quarter of its health remaining. And that Bleak Wind Storm finally finishing off this game, sending us to a rubber match, our only top 8 match in Knoxville, Sierra, that has a game 3.
I'm curious too, the way Kyle looked at his screen after that, he double connected. There was the lean in and then like, looks like okay, where I don't know if he necessarily thought that maybe he'd be getting the KO onto the Ogerpon there, but hey, you're going to take your chance for this game 3.
I think we all collectively leaned in, right? We leaned in to see if it would connect, and then to see if it would KO, and then all popped off for Kyle after that connection there. And you have to wonder whether Enrique wants to go back to that Trick Room strategy, because once Trick Room went up, it seemed like Kyle was taking a little bit better advantage of it than Enrique was.
Yeah, I feel like, too, when we're looking at something like the Glamora, notably the second Hyper Voice, it did crit the Glamora, which then put it in range of that third Hyper Voice to be able to seal that Pokemon off. So you already know that the Fergraph is not actually just doing enough damage in this Trick Room situation, that if you are going in on this Trick Room, you are set for that. You now know that Kyle has a pretty decent answer into it. So sound the alarm. Game 3, Glamora and Ogerpon yet again for Kyle. Flutter Mane and Ogerpon over on Enrique's end. A much significantly stronger, more powerful start.
I like this lead a lot for Kyle. We did see it to some great success in game 2. And I think importantly, the Glamora is a huge source of damage in this matchup for Kyle, and letting it get that Meteor Beam set up right away with the help from the Ogerpon using Follow Me next to it is great. This is also, I think, a better lead than in game 1 because this Flutter Mane does not have Protect. Enrique does not have the chance to go for double Protect on this turn, which would prevent the Glamora from getting any damage off with that Meteor Beam like we saw in the first game. So if you opt for a Meteor Beam this turn into that Flutter Mane slot, you're guaranteeing not only the special attack boost from the Meteor Beam, but a huge amount of damage using that Meteor Beam.
Oh, and this is a big one too, because if you do want to have a safe Glamora setup over on Kyle's end, then we could see that potential of the redirection. So going into it, Terrestrialization to start. We saw the Hornleech lock in over on the opposing end, and Terrestrialization coming out here does mean that could be super active, but we will get to see that special defense boost. That one was Enrique's. We'll have to see if Kyle's follows suit.
Yeah, special defense boost from Buddy Aspect will be useful against this Glamora, but Kyle's Glamora going, no, not the Glamora, the Ogerpon going straight for the Follow Me here instead.
There will be the double up attack into it with the Shadow Ball and the Hornleech follow-up, considering it's the way you had to do things. That is going to be a special defense drop at that point, which is just funny. Not significant. Hornleech is still going to be enough to be picking that off. So one powerful threat eliminated. The Glamora, though, left to its own devices. This is the Meteor Beam. This is where you're going to be getting that +1 special attack and be able to attack right away with that Power Herb. It's where you're targeting. It will be into that Flutter Mane. That is going to be a good chunk of damage, but not enough for the KO.
Not enough for the KO, but still a huge bit of damage into that Flutter Mane. That means that really anything left that can attack it should be able to knock it out in one hit, but you might need to use some spread damage to do it because Enrique's Ogerpon is still on the field, still very healthy, and still has the option to use Follow Me. Tornadus comes out here, so you do have that Bleak Windstorm at your disposal, but I think at this point, the Tailwind might be a little bit more valuable just to make sure that Glamora has the chance to attack before something like the Ogerpon can Ivy Cudgel it.
Yeah, I feel like you're kind of, yet again, forced into that speed. When you're up against naturally speedy Pokemon like that Flutter Mane, you want to make sure if you have this Glamora kind of set up that you'll be able to take advantage of it where you can. And that'll be the thing. We do still have the Terastallization option over onto Kyle's end if you want to get away from a potential Ivy Cudgel headed your way. But the Spiky Shield is another way to be keeping it safe. This is a way you can be setting up for that speed on your end with that Tailwind. So next time you can go for a Bleak Wind and a double up with that Glamora.
Shadow Ball comes out from Flutter Mane into the Tornadus, though, does not take the bait and attack into that Glamora's Spiky Shield. And Ivy Cudgel also coming out. Two very strong attacks into this Tornadus, which did get to set up Tailwind at least. So Kyle will have the full 3 turns with his last 2 Pokemon, but down to 2 Pokemon remaining to Enrique's 3. Look, not even 3, 4. The Flutter Mane still sitting there very on the field.
With the Chi-Yu and the Glamora, I do feel like this is your best chance with these Pokemon to try and steamroll through the rest of Enrique's team. Of course, the Ogerpon can go for his Spiky Shield, but the Flutter Mane should just be clean KO'd this time, and it's about how much damage you can be doing in the meantime with that.
I think the only issue is you have 2 Pokemon weak to this Ivy Cudgel that's boosted by the Water Terastallization, and only one of them can Terastallize. And of course, you have to be going for that Heat Wave. I think that's really your only option to lock into with this Chi-Yu if you're Kyle. But that means that the Ogerpon will be taking heavily resisted damage. It is a pure water type thanks to that Terastallization, and has a special defense boost to boot.
Yeah. Being outsped, a smart swap to get the Flutter in the back. So once Tailwind expires, you do have an option to be attacking there. And Farigiraf, full health, coming in instead. Terastallization for Kyle with one of his last 2 Pokemon. It will be that Glamora into that Grass type. Make sure that the Ivy Cudgel is into that slot. Will not be doing much.
No more super effective damage coming out from that Ogerpon into Glamora, but Ogerpon going straight for the Spiky Shield, not wanting to take any damage from either of these 2 very powerful Pokemon on Kyle's end.
And that'll keep it safe from the Sludge Bomb. The Chi-Yu, you have to imagine it will be that Heat Wave, be good, but Ogerpon will be able to waste one of these turns of the Tailwind over onto Kyle's end. And we'll have to see if Chi-Yu can connect. It will. So Farigiraf brought right down into the yellow on swapping.
And I guess that's the benefit of having that Chi-Yu be your last Pokemon, right? There's really nothing that can switch in there that doesn't get 2-hit KO'd by Heat Wave. So you do have the option to go straight for another Sludge Bomb into that Ogerpon slot and another Heat Wave to KO Farigiraf. But I don't believe that a combination of Sludge Bomb and Heat Wave should be able to KO Ogerpon without a critical hit. So if you do have the chance to get off an Ivy Cudgel on this turn, you can probably just KO that Chi-Yu outright and leave Kyle's Glamora as the final Pokemon remaining.
And that's it. The special defense boost, sure, there is the Beads of Ruin. Sure, you are going to be taking a lot of damage from the opposing Pokemon, but if you're able to survive the turn, then Enrique's just looking so good going on forward. Sludge Bomb will be the first move of choice, bringing it down just below half, and the double connect over on the Heat Wave. Ogerpon hanging on. That was the pivotal one. That was the important one. And now can go for the Ivy Cudgel into this Chi-Yu. Try and get rid of it, and it is gone. Kyle, last and final Pokemon.
This Ogerpon proving to be an issue for Kyle here. That Water-type Terastallization in conjunction with the Embody Aspect boost mean that this Ogerpon is taking such little damage from this Glamora and the Chi-Yu all at the same time, which is perfect considering those were the 2 really strongest attackers on Kyle's team that he's opted to bring. Now that the Glamora is down to the final Pokemon remaining, I just don't know if it has enough left in the tank, especially considering you have the option for that Clear Smog to reset that special attack boost.
You needed one of those Pokemon to be critting on that last turn for any sort of opportunity. The Amoonguss coming in seals the deal, and with that, Enrique Grimaldo moving his way into top 4 here at Knoxville.
Continuing a career best